Again.
Thanks, Emily. If we could go to the first slide, I'd like to start by talking about the state of current affairs in workforce development, not only in the region, but also some of the things that are happening nationally. First and foremost, one of the challenges we have in Pennsylvania, and specifically in Lackawanna and Luzerne County in the Northeast, is that workforce development is very fragmented. We did an asset map of workforce providers last fall for just Lackawanna and Luzerne County and counted over 38 or 39 programs in the two-county area. Without a concerted, coordinated effort, the messaging is confusing. It doesn't necessarily reach everybody it's supposed to reach. But this is also a challenge to workforce development statewide. It's not one of Pennsylvania's main strengths. The higher cost of post-secondary education has made some folks a little shy about post-secondary education, not recognizing that there's incredible opportunities in credentialing and certifications and other types of post-secondary education and training. The term is tend to be used globally, so we're kind of missing out on some of the other opportunities that exist. Another factor that we have to work out more diligently in our region is equitable access to information, to workforce, to education and training. Northeastern Pennsylvania has grown and diversified through a lot of in-migration over the past decade. Those that maybe work in school districts probably see the most diversity in our community, but it's there. And the information that's out is very cumbersome to anyone in who's not in the field, but maybe trying to utilize resources. So if there are individuals that are A, living in poverty, or B, coming from other states and other countries, it just becomes even more convoluted. So it's something that we have to work on as a region to ensure that everybody has access to the information and understands the training opportunities, the education and skills needed for different types of jobs, because there's a lot of misinformation about that too. The messaging among the various stakeholders is confusing. As I mentioned, we completed an asset map of those types of workforce development initiatives as part of the Scranton Area Community Foundation's NEPA Thrives effort, and they're going to be making it public on a website in the coming months. But not everybody involved in workforce development or economic development is really aware of all of the education and training opportunities that exist and who's doing what. And we're hopeful that through the Scranton Area Foundation's navigation support, that it will help create more consistent messaging, collaboration, and maybe fill in some gaps where we have some holes in terms of workforce development efforts. Remote and hybrid work has changed the face of workers, and COVID really exacerbated the situation, but then many employers into more organizational planning to prepare for things that may prevent them from going into the workforce. And what many employers have already learned, that if you do offer a hybrid environment, you're seeing larger applicant pools for jobs. It improves retention. Productivity is not necessarily affected, but it does require that managers manage differently. And it's a little bit more cumbersome than if you have everybody in a room or in an office building working together. But hybrid work is here to stay. And any organizations that want to attract that 20-some age group market really needs to consider a hybrid opportunity, because that's where that age group is gravitating to. Over the past couple of years, we saw incredible upward pressure on wages. Part of it was due to COVID and people staying out of the workforce, whether they were seniors or individuals caring for children or their parents. people left the workforce. Some people left permanently, retired early, decided to open up their own business, whatever the case. But we still saw across the board upward pressure on wages. And this is a national phenomenon, but it's certainly one that was prevalent in northeastern Pennsylvania. Well, we didn't see as much pressure of creating that large of an increase last year, not likely to do so this year. We will see some changes in healthcare wages. There is incredible competition for practitioners nationally. And over the next decade, we're going to see incredible competition for personal care assistants, certified nursing assistants, and technicians in various types of hospital settings going forward. Another thing affecting workforce development are changing downtowns and business centers. We're seeing, because of the hybrid work opportunities, a lot of vacant office space in our downtowns, and even in some of the business and industrial parks in the suburban areas of our counties. It's really affecting a lot of the bigger cities. One of the opportunities here could be for some adaptive reuse into multifamily housing. Housing is a problem in northeastern Pennsylvania. We need to see more multifamily housing. We need to see senior housing. And we need to see accessible housing. So this creates an opportunity to grow some of that in some of those vacant office buildings. And if we can develop a critical mass of population in our downtowns and business centers, it's likely to bring in more retail and more services to meet the needs of those residents. And that, coupled with existing public transportation that is more prevalent in downtowns, becomes a win. I'm not saying that all vacant industrial buildings or office buildings should be turned into housing, but I think there's an opportunity we need to consider here because of the fact that we do have a major housing shortage in northeastern Pennsylvania. And then finally, passenger rail. While I think it's going to have an impact on workforce, I don't think it's going to be totally transformative. The train goes both ways. We may gain some workers and we may lose some workers. I think the important thing to understand is the current proposed routes are about 3 hours long. And so that's from train entry to train exit. So if you're talking about a person going in either direction for an 8-hour workday, and yet they've got 3 hours of train time, you suddenly added 6 hours of transportation, and that's not including the time it would take to get from train station to their final work point or from their home to the train station. So I don't think we're going to see major changes within regard to the workforce. I think it's going to be more attractive for individuals that want to live in an area like northeastern Pennsylvania that work in a hybrid situation in the big city where they maybe only have to go in the office 1 day a week or 2 days a week. But I think we have to remember that it's both ways. I think where we're going to see the biggest impact from rail is the benefit of tourism. I think we have an incredible opportunity to draw more people into northeastern Pennsylvania to take advantage of the many assets that we have here. And I know some people are probably cringing at the thought of that, but I think we're our own worst enemy in failing to recognize that we've got incredible cultural heritage, recreational, and entertainment types of venues that people already come here to see. Tourism is a major driver of our economy in northeastern Pennsylvania. So I believe that this passenger rail is going to really have the opportunity to add to that and create more investment in northeastern Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. So let's look at who we are. What comprises northeastern Pennsylvania? So we talk about the regional labor sheds. So that's Lackawanna and Luzerne, Wayne and Pike County, Susquehanna County, Wyoming County, because people commute in our area, believe it or not. There is no 18-foot wall dividing all the counties between each other. There are commuting patterns where people are going to work in other counties. So as you can see, we have a pretty robust labor market, not just in the region, but in Lackawanna County in and of itself. I think what's important to note is that over the past 5 or so years, we've started to see a slight increase in the under 18 population, and that's primarily occurring because of in-migration. People that are moving into the region tend to be just a little bit younger and have more small children or tweens and teens in the families than we've had in the past. When you look at the other end of the spectrum, you could see that close to 20% of our population is 65 and over. And then within the next decade, another 15% are going to fall into that 65 or older bucket. So we are a little older than a lot of our peer communities around the country, but not too much because we're looking at that transition of the baby boomers. That is the largest population segment in the country as we speak. And the challenge with that, and we've noticed it actually pre-COVID, is that people that start falling into that 65 and over age group start to leave the workforce. COVID exacerbated the situation by people who wanted to leave early as a result of it. But we're going to continue to have a mass exodus. That's not just unique to Northeastern Pennsylvania, it's nationally. There's going to be a mass exodus out of the workforce in every community across the country because of that baby boomer population and because the subsequent generations behind baby boomers have not had as many large families. And as a matter of fact, people in their 20s now are not having any children at all. So we're going to see that massive shift in the workplace as time goes on, and shortages of workers, just in sheer raw numbers, will continue to happen. Next slide, please. I looked at education attainment, if we could go back one to that, and I have to say I was hesitant to put it up because things are changing so much in this area. This is where we stand now. Some college no degree is actually misleading because it seems to indicate that, you know, these are people that took a couple college classes and dropped out, when it also contains individuals who have gone on to some other form of post-secondary education and completed it, but it's not considered a 2 or 4 year degree. So it could be apprenticeship, it could be credentialing, it could be certification. And I think as time goes on, I'm hopeful that the US government, which collects and produces this data, actually makes it a little bit more granular so we could start to measure things better, because I think that is a big area where we're going to continue to see growth over the next decade or two. Workplaces, especially those engaged in science and technology, are changing rapidly. And in most cases, things like credentialing and certificates are really what's needed in order to stay current with the technology. We also note that, whether we agree with it or not, that a lot of governments on a local and state level across the country, as well as some private businesses, are eliminating the bachelor degree requirements for some jobs. For some, they're focusing on experience, and for some, they're focusing on just high school graduates that they could train to grow in these types of jobs. So I think these statistics over time, we can study them longitudinally, but the messaging is going to be convoluted because there's really so many changes happening in economic and workforce development. Next slide, please. These very colorful pie charts talk about the industries that hold the most employees. The top one is in Lackawanna County, and the lower one on the right side is that whole labor shed region that I talked about with multiple counties. And as you can see, Lackawanna County is fairly reflective of the whole region. Healthcare and social assistance is by far the largest employment sector. Um, in the county and in our region. It's followed by retail, trade, and manufacturing. Manufacturing has had a resurgence in northeastern Pennsylvania over the past decade. And we have a number of growing manufacturing concerns in the region, and I think that's going to continue to be a job generator. I think we need to think about manufacturing a little bit differently than we have in the past, because there's all sorts of automated processes now in various degrees in these manufacturing firms that require different types of skills from a worker than they had in the past. They're not just your production worker who manually does things in a manufacturing firm anymore. So there is some post-secondary education and training that will help individuals that choose to enter into the manufacturing arena at a young age. What I think is important to note about this particular slide is if you take healthcare and social assistance and you combine it with educational services, you're going to get close to 30% of the region's workforce working in just those two sectors. That's a huge number. And those are called our anchor institutions. These are employers like colleges and universities and health systems that have major investments in specific communities that can't really easily pick up and leave, hence the term anchor. And they represent a huge part of our community. So in that respect, when you start to think about the ripple effect, that they employ the most, that means the employees at all levels are reinvesting in through earned income taxes and property taxes back into the community. Since there are a variety of jobs on the spectrum in terms of education and skill level, there are a variety of spectrum of jobs with regard to wage levels, and a number of higher wage paying jobs in many of these sectors that help contribute to the economic capacity of our region. So they're very important to our community as employers, as well as they are as providing services to all of the residents of our community. So those anchor institutions are very important to our economy, representing nearly 1/3 of total employment in the area. Next slide, please. So this is another way of looking at the sectors of employment. You could see that the first column talks about employees. That's the number of employees in each one of the sectors, regardless of the type of occupation. They're just employed in that particular industry sector. So the current average wages, annual wages, are really an average of all of the types of employees, from your office assistant in a hospital to your most specialized specialist in a hospital system, likely earning the most. So that's the wages. When we look at location quotient, we're looking at the density of jobs in our community compared to other communities. So if it's over 1.0, it means we have a higher concentration of jobs in those sectors than comparable communities across the country. What I really want to focus on is that column in blue. It's called total demand. So often we talk about industry growth. And if you go to that last column and you look and see, there's minimal growth in the industries over the next decade. But if you look at total demand, those are astonishing numbers. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier. We have those baby boomers leaving the workplace. They're exiting the workforce because of retirement, and it's creating a hole in the job market in those sectors. This also includes what we call transfers, or people exiting the industry for whatever reason. We talked about how during COVID, a lot of people retired and a lot of people switched careers, or they opened up their own business. So when you take those two factors along with growth, you end up with that total demand figure. And what that's telling us is in 10 years, we're going to need 20,683 individuals to enter healthcare and social assistance to meet the demand of the population. That's a huge number. And so how we approach workforce development, especially as it relates to supporting those kinds of anchor institutions, is extremely critical. And you could see in those numbers, there's heavy investment in transportation and warehousing, accommodations and food services, educational services, our teachers, everybody from kindergarten teachers to post-secondary teachers to special education teachers fall in that category. And there's another 6,700 individuals in there. When we look at manufacturing, we're talking about 9,300 individuals entering the manufacturing workforce, over 13,000 in retail trade, and supporting everything from our grocery stores and drugstores to clothing stores and all types of retail outlets. So we have significant demand to meet over the course of the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So we're going to take this down a notch and look at the total demand by occupation. So you could see that there are a number of jobs and a variety of supports. Healthcare support is pretty big, over 10,000 jobs there. Healthcare practitioners, that's 37, almost 3,800 doctors. Obviously, logistics is big in our region. Warehousing, transportation, and logistics are looking at over 15,000 in those types of jobs. Office and administrative support, over 11,600 jobs. So all of these jobs require varying levels of post-secondary education and training. Some require that credentialing or certification that we talked about. Some of the other jobs is, as you go down the line, look at apprenticeships that can be through unions like carpentry or electrical, plumbing. Estimates on those jobs are significant as baby boomers retire out of those businesses and just shut them down. The labor unions in the region have incredible training programs to get individuals educated, trained, on the job experience to enter these fields, and those jobs are very lucrative. And so what I guess I'm saying is there is incredible opportunity regardless of an individual's education and skill level, and regardless of whether they're considered a candidate for a four-year higher education institution to serve as a student there. The opportunity is there for everyone. The messaging on worker education, training, and job opportunities has to become clearer because I mentioned earlier, it's convoluted. And with 38 different workforce development programs around the region that aren't necessarily connected or collaborating, it just makes the marketplace even more confusing for individuals. Next slide, please. So this is from our database. It's called Real-Time Intelligence, and it's a fancy word for job posting. So in the past 30 days, there have been over 4,000 job announcements in the region, covering 416 different occupations with over 1,200 different employers, looking for 156 different types of certifications and a variety of hard skills and soft skills. And as you could see, education levels, all 6 education levels are included, and 168 programs or majors, concentrations, areas of study, depending on the type of wording you use. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of the employers are requiring, and many of you who are employers probably are aware of all of this and can see your own job announcements in some of these. Next slide, please. So this is just the top 15 or so types of occupations that are being advertised. I don't think it's any surprise that our logistics and distribution industry is looking for people. We always hear about registered nurses, and then you go down to more licensed practical and licensed vocational work nurses are up there. Nursing assistants is another category that seems to have ebbs and flows, but a lot of job announcements. And then you look at those in education, there's other healthcare occupations like pharmacy techs and physician assistants, maintenance and repair workers in a variety of types of workforce settings. Retail is up there. And again, I think that the variety of these job titles definitely reflects the diversity and the opportunity we have here to really help educate and inform individuals looking for jobs or for those that are looking to transfer out of their current job, perhaps upskill or into new positions. Again, the opportunities are here. Next slide, please. As you could see, it just sorts the job locations. There are a number of job opportunities in Scranton. Some of them are even by zip code, and some of them are just Scranton globally. But of course, with Scranton being the county seat and the largest community in the county, there's incredible opportunity right there. Next slide, please. These are the types of certifications that were most frequently mentioned in the job ads. As you could see, there are several in various types of healthcare occupations, some requiring significant certification as a registered nurse, or things like certified nursing assistants, licensed practical nurses, medical assistant certification, and then radiology techs are growing as well. And that's another area our healthcare institutions will tell you that they're concerned about shortages is in those technology positions in healthcare systems. And then, of course, there's things like CDL licenses and different types of business certifications like CPAs that are prevalent on this list. And this list is not exhaustive, by the way. I just picked the first, the top 15. Next slide, please. So these are some of the hard skills that have been identified. I'd really like to point out the top two relating to basic computer skills and the use of Microsoft Office and Microsoft Excel. And then, of course, if you go down a little bit, they specifically mention Outlook, and then down a few more, they specifically mention Word. So computer skills are still pretty high up on the skills needed. These types of skills really are required across all industries and all different types of occupations. There's all sorts of reporting requirements, even in manufacturing and distribution, that require workers to have some technology background, especially in the Microsoft Office products. It's very important for students coming out of high school and college to be able to have these skills as well. Next slide, please. And then if you look at the soft skills, by far communication, verbal and written skills is ranked number one. Cooperative team players, number two. Good customer service. You know, some of these soft skills are skills that come very easy to individuals, and for others, they have to be cultivated through their home environment, their school environment, but a lot of them have to do with the ability to work with others and to communicate well. And that critical thinking component shows up in a lot of different terms on this particular list. I went beyond the top 15 because I wanted you all to see the things that employers are looking for, that they find important, that they seem to be having challenges with in employing their new hires and retaining workers. Next slide, please. These are the programs: business, engineering, accounting, computer science, nursing, special ed, social work, that are in high demand. They correlate with the industries that we talk about when it comes to health and education in terms of nursing and special education and social work, speech language pathology, psychology, clinical positions. But we are blessed with a number of really strong business schools in our area as well. And so things like business programs in accounting and business administration that are producing graduates can certainly help meet the need that these employers are indicating. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some myths and some challenges. Northeastern Pennsylvania has a pretty high concentration of individuals living in poverty. And poverty becomes generational because parents can't teach their kids what they don't know. And if families are struggling to put food on the table or pay the rent to avoid being evicted, they're certainly not in a position to have parents educate their children on career opportunities, on workforce programs that may be available, and how to access that information, because they as parents probably don't even know how to help themselves with that. And that's part of living in poverty, where what you and I maybe consider, well, geez, you just go online and you look this up, or you go here, or you call here. Someone living in poverty does not have that thought process when basic needs aren't being met. And so they are only able to teach what they know and what their children live and see. And that's how we have that generational cycle of poverty. So when we talk about messaging being equitable, it's not just in terms of having things available in other languages or in smaller communities where there is a diverse community. Individuals living in poverty are a pretty big part of our community, and that equitable access to information needs to be articulated to them too, in a manner that they can understand, using resources they have access to, which may not necessarily be a home computer with internet access, or being able to go somewhere because they rely on public transportation as opposed to having their own vehicle. So we have to think differently, and it's extremely important because we need to remain competitive as a region and fill these jobs in order to continue to serve the people that do live here, but to generate that economic activity that really supports our communities and many of the assets in it. The other myth is a four-year degree. I still come across so many parents to think their kids just have to go to college. Their kids may be college material or they may not be college material, but parents think their kids have to go to college. And in 2024, that is definitely not the case. There are various types of 2-year degrees that are good, certificates, credentialing, serving in apprenticeships in the unions create incredible family sustaining jobs. So there is opportunity, because the bottom line is not every kid is fit for a college education. And if they're forced into one, they're not going to succeed. And if they don't succeed, it really affects them going forward. And that, I think, is why we have a larger percentage of what we call opportunity youth, 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in school, who are not employed, in part because they may have been pushed into higher education they weren't ready for, or in part because they don't really know what options are available to them and how to gain access to them. So again, where we talk about misinformation and lack of collaboration and communication among workforce development organizations, this is an area that I think we can improve the messaging both to kids in high school, to regional residents who aren't working or who are underemployed. Education and training, it does not necessarily have to be that expensive for bank breaking. There are programs in our region that support various types of education and training. There are state and federal workforce development dollars that help employees through training for specific employees. There are other types of workforce development programs like NEPA Rise that help individuals in certain income levels go to schools like Johnson College and get training in a year or less in different types of academic or technical programs to put them in the workforce. Again, it's a matter of knowing what's out there and how to access them. I talk about, and those of you, I apologize, who've been on this call in years past, some of these are the same, and it's because they haven't really changed. There is still a misperception that there's a lack of regional economic opportunity here, that in order to make a good career, you have to leave Northeastern Pennsylvania. And it's frustrating because I think if you saw those 4,000 job announcements just in the past 30 days across a variety of sectors in various occupations, there is incredible economic opportunity here. This is a good region to start your career. It's also a good region if you're looking at reskilling or upskilling. We have a very diverse base of industry sectors in Northeastern Pennsylvania. I often hear that, well, we're not known for anything, and that's why we're not up on anybody's radar, and that's why people don't think there's opportunity here. Well, I have to tell you, not being known for any one thing has really played in our favor. Because that means we have diverse opportunities to be able to attract a diverse set of workers with diverse skills and education opportunities. So there's a broader sense of economic opportunity here than maybe in other communities where they're only known for a particular sector. You also run the risk of economic turmoil if that sector has an issue. At least here, if a particular sector has a significant issue, like in certain types of manufacturing or distribution, it's not going to take down the whole economy and lay off tons of employees like it has if you are known only for technology or only for this or only for that. So it is a positive, and I think we need to just really think a little bit out of the box and think about all the incredible types of companies that we do have here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. A lot of problems with wages have been brought up, that individuals are paid less here. And in some cases, that's true, but the cost of living here is also significantly less than the Lehigh Valley, than Philadelphia, than New York. And that accounts for some of the wage differential. But with upward pressure that we've seen on wages as a result of COVID, and then the scarcity in healthcare employment, we're going to continue to see more competitive wages. It's another driver to really bring people back, and a myth that we have to dispel, because it's absolutely not true in Northeastern Pennsylvania. The other thing is quality of life. So often we hear that, there's nothing to do, there's no place to go. There's a pretty darn good quality of life in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And I think sometimes as residents, we tend to think that you have to go somewhere else to get it done, or to do something, when that's really not the case. There is year-round recreation. There are year-round venues. There are sports activities at a variety of levels that are all year round. And then when you look at other things that create quality of life in terms of healthcare options and education infrastructure, we've got it here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. We may be a little older, we may be a little rickety, we may need some building and facade improvements and road repairs and sidewalk repairs to make things look a little pretty. But when you look deeper and past that superficial stuff on the outside, we've really got the quality of life that's attractive to individuals at all different ages. We often talk about having to get out of our own way because we fail to see the things that are right in our own backyard that are very promising for our region. And we tend to talk about the negative. So rather than talking about, oh my goodness, there were all these shows at the Kirby and all of these things happening up at the stadium, et cetera, we focus on the negative, and that's the message that gets articulated. And we have to change our messaging as individuals as well, to help get rid of that poor image and identity that we really shouldn't have. The region does not deserve it. And yes, I'm a cheerleader for Northeastern Pennsylvania. I think we have incredible opportunity now and going forward. And I think we can be competitive economically with other regions. As the workforce shrinks and more demands and poaching and things like that are happening to attract and retain workers. So I literally talked without breathing for about 35, 40 minutes, spewing a lot of data and numbers. I apologize for that. But I hope you see some opportunity. I'd be glad to respond to any questions. And I believe Emily is going to send out the PowerPoint to everybody who wants it, or everybody on the call, whether you want it or not. But anyway, any questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate your time today. I know many of you on the call, you know how to find me. Emily can share my email.